Hi, Paul Slackus, Good News Broadcast, speaking to Dr. Barry Sears, Ph.D. Hi, Barry. How are ya?
Very good, Paul.
You know, I'm very happy once again to speak with you. Spoke with you. We must have, we've been doing this 12 years. How long have you been involved with your zone campaign, let's call it?
Well, the first book was written 15 years ago, and probably another 5 years before that, so probably close to 20 years.
Okay, so I guess we probably might have even spoke 12 years ago, and years after, and what initially brought you to the zone mindset?
Well, basically, it was making sure I didn't die prematurely of heart disease. My father died in his early 50s of heart disease, and he was a world-class athlete. All of his brothers died in their early 50s of heart disease, as did my grandfather. So I realized some 30 years ago I carried the same genes that would genetically predispose me for an early death from heart disease. Now, I couldn't change those genes, but I could hopefully change the expression of those genes, and that led me for a way of searching of how to use food as a drug to change the expression of our genes.
Very, 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 very interesting. Sorry, that's how interesting it was. It gets a big buzz to it. What's the silent inflammation profile test? And that's developed from the blood, and a urine test combo, urinary silent inflammation test. What are those?
Well, the thing that basically, if we stand back from virtually every chronic disease, what you find is inflammation, whether it be obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's. Doesn't matter. But there are two types of inflammation. The first type most people are familiar with because it hurts. That's why you see a doctor. But now we know there's a second type. A second type that basically is the same inflammatory problems, but below the perception of pain. And since there's no pain, you do nothing to stop this type of inflammation. It can linger for years, if not decades, until there's enough damage to your organs, you call it chronic disease. That's the inflammation that if you pick up, the sooner you pick it up, the faster you can reverse it. And that type of inflammation, that silent inflammation, is all caused 100% by our diet.
Okay, so let's use obesity because it seems to be on a prevalent one, and two, it's on a lot of people's mind because gaining weight and being in that case, I don't know whether it's obesity, but just being overweight, because obesity is extremely overweight, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just say overweight in general. How do people go about living their life and trying to stay at a weight that makes them feel comfortable?
Well, first of all, nobody wakes up one morning and says, today I want to get fat.
Okay.
It just doesn't happen. But yet 2/3 of Americans, that's the position they find themselves in. It turns out that people who gain weight are genetically predisposed to gain weight, just like I'm genetically predisposed to die an early death from heart disease. Now, what turns on both those genes? It turns out to be this silent inflammation. And so what we have is saying that people think that people who are overweight, they're simply morally inferior. They don't have the willpower to eat less and exercise more. But the fact that's not the case. What's happened, this silent inflammation caused by fairly radical changes in our diet in the last 30 years, is now turning on these ancient genes which are making those who are genetically predisposed fat become fat. So it's not basically eating less and exercising more we have to do. We have to turn off the underlying cause, which is the silent inflammation. Okay,
so you created you've created many, maybe they're all built around the Zone 1, 2, 3, a 30-day plan known as the Zone 1, 2, 3 to help reverse its effect. So what does somebody first take the silent inflammation profile test? Is there a test that somebody does? They take the blood test?
Well, there is a test to confirm it, but if you're fat, no test required. If you're sick, no test required.
Okay.
But I can tell you that many of the Olympic athletes I've worked with over the years, they look great in swimsuits, but they too are very highly inflamed. So looking at a person, you can't tell whether they have inflammation. Just anymore, looking at a person, can you tell their cholesterol levels? But what you want to do, whether you take the test or not, saying, I want to follow an anti-inflammatory lifestyle because it's inflammation that's going to rob all the quality of your life. And therefore, this is a lifelong struggle, and you basically, the only drug you have to reverse it turns out to be your diet. So now we say, okay, how do I reverse becoming overweight? Well, first of all, you go on a diet But the word diet, I'm using it in the terms from the ancient Greek root, which means way of life. Whatever you do to lose weight, you have to be doing that the rest of your life. So if you think basically eating a grapefruit 4 times a day is something you want to do the rest of your life, that's a great diet. Not a very healthy one, but it's a diet. So what you're looking at is saying, if inflammation is my enemy, what is an anti-inflammatory diet? Well, basically your grandmother told you this 2 generations ago. She told you 4 things. She said, first, eat small meals throughout the day. The second thing she told you, you have some protein at every meal. The third thing she said, you can't leave the table until you eat all your vegetables. And the fourth thing she told you, you've got to take your fish oil. Now everybody laughed at Grandma, but it turns out she was at the cutting edge of 21st century molecular biology, because we now understand everything that Grandma was telling you can now affect the expression of our genes, and by controlling those genes, you control your weight, you control your future, you control your quality of life.
And that fish oil was cod liver oil?
Well, that's the only kind of fish oil she had. Turns out today, cod liver oil is still as stinky as it was 2 generations ago, but now it's more contaminated because every fish in the world today is contaminated. You can run, but you can't hide.
Okay.
So just eating lots of fish may not be the answer. So you have to get basically highly purified fish oil as one part. So we talk about a zone 1, 2, 3 program.
Right.
The first part, you've got to basically balance protein to carbohydrate the best you can every time you eat. And what do you need for that? Only 1 hand and 1 eye.
Right.
And here's all the rules you need. Divide your plate at each meal into 3 equal sections. On 1/3 the plate, you put some low-fat protein that's no bigger or thicker than the palm of your hand. And the other 2/3 of the plate, you fill it until it's overflowing with colorful carbohydrates. What are those? They're called fruits and vegetables. Why are they colorful? Because they contain certain chemicals called polyphenols. And if you eat enough of those, they can help basically reduce silent inflammation. The second part of the Zone 1, 2, 3 program, you got to take fish oil because that helps dilute out all the inflammation that's otherwise basically building up in your body. And the final part, the polyphenols, if you're eating lots of fruits and vegetables, you're getting them. But guess what? Nobody in America likes fruits and vegetables. The two number one sources of fruits and vegetables in the American diet are French fries and ketchup. So basically, we're not doing a real good job on getting enough polyphenols in the diet.
So then what do we do?
Well, we can do one thing. We can throw our hands up in disgust and say it is what it is, or basically saying, you can say, okay, if it's polyphenols that's key, can I possibly get them in a pill? Well, it turns out you possibly can. Because these polyphenols can be isolated from fruits and vegetables. Now, they're not an end-all by itself, but it's one way of getting that 10 servings of fruits and vegetables you should have every day.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. I know that there's this food preparation. Are you connected with the Zone food preparation?
No, as Don King would say, only in America. And it's amazing that I keep finding people coming out of the woodwork and basically saying, we're making Zone meals. I said, what are you doing? And so I had to keep on kind of unfortunately spend a lot of money in legal expenses. I said, I applaud your efforts, but basically, please don't use the name Zone because that implies I'm endorsing your services. And I've seen some pretty egregious attempts to say we're making Zone meals. I saw one company making Zone meals with brownies and cheesecake. And it didn't even taste very good.
Oh, you got it. All right. Well, that was not a. I didn't know, but I wanted to clarify that. So that's very important to clarify right now for our audience because Dr. Sears is a very serious man in this regard, and he has done, I know, for all these years, a tremendous amount because of a good soul. I see that in when I eat, I think of your hand. I look at my palm of my hand every time, all the time. In fact, Dr. Sears, I've created a good news to go diet for us, and I'm on a competition, and that's part of what we do. Is a little bit of a competitive thing with my landlord, and I took off 30 pounds. But you've given me more intelligence here to consider and to utilize. And what's your latest book?
Well, the latest book I have is called Toxic Fat, and this basically goes in greater detail of why Americans are really fat. And we talk about this perfect nutritional storm that started here 30 years ago in America, and now is spreading worldwide. And it's a scary story. It's saying that the government is funding basically our obesity problem. And people say, well, I thought the government was trying to reverse obesity. Mm-hmm. Well, it pays about $20 billion a year in subsidies to support the production of refined carbohydrates coming from corn and vegetable oils rich in omega-6 fatty acids coming from soybeans. Now, either one is fairly benign, but when you combine the two, it's like adding kerosene to a fire. And what you do when these two are basically now become integral parts of the American diet, which they have in the last 30 years, you start increasing the production of a certain fatty acid called arachidonic acid. I just shorten it called toxic fat, because that particular fatty acid drives the inflammation process, and as you become more inflamed, it turns on those ancient genes that make you fat, make you sick, and make you dumb. And that pretty well describes what's happened in America the last 30 years.
Okay. Well, Dr. Sears, let me ask you one quick question. What's good? Last question, and then I'm going to get back in touch with you if that's okay, to do some more, because you just have so much brilliance in this, and I thank you for sharing it, and I know that's your passion. What's good news for you?
Well, the good news is basically that all this can be reversed. I mean, it's once you understand what the problem is, the solution becomes obvious. And so, everybody here in America says, the future's bleak. And it very well will be if we keep on the same pathway. But the future will be very, very bright. But we have to take charge of our future by starting in the kitchen. And that's where true healthcare reform begins.
Okay. Dr. Sears, thank you very much. Dr. Sears has his website, zonediet.com, and thank you so much. It's always an honor to speak with you. Thank you.
Always my pleasure, Paul.
Take care, Barry. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.